Reluctant to recognise the new government in Syria, fighters from the Druze minority have been involved in fierce clashes. A ceasefire is now in place, but some Druze leaders have called for international protection. So how will President Ahmed Sharaa deal with them, and how's Israel's involvement complicating the situation? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. Syria's new government is facing a serious challenge, this time not from foreign powers or remnants of the Assad regime, but from within the country's own borders. Tensions have flared in the south, where fighting between members of the Druze minority and Bedouin groups have reignited fears of wider sectarian unrest. The violence comes as Druze spiritual leaders refuse to recognise the authority of Ahmed Sharaa, the man now leading the post-Assad transition government. Also, the Alawite community, long seen as aligned with the old regime, says it's being targeted in revenge attacks. And in a move that could further inflame tensions, Israel has warned Damascus not to harm the Druze. Are the concerns of the community justified? And what does this mean for the unity of Syria? We'll discuss all of this with our panel of guests in just a moment, but first, this report by Victoria Gatenby.
Syrian government forces entered the city of As Suwayda after days of violence. The government is facing one of the most complex challenges since it took power last December, a deepening conflict in the south involving the Druze community. Fighting between Druze and Bedouin fighters has left dozens of people dead. These communities have fought in the past, and the latest violence is reviving long-standing fears such unrest will escalate.
Our goal is to protect the residents who have not engaged in fighting against the forces of the current government's Ministry of Defence. Our primary mission is to protect civilians from the gangs that are wreaking havoc in the city.
The Druze are a minority Arab sect that emerged in the 11th century. They live across Syria, Lebanon, Jordan and Israel. At the centre of the dispute is the refusal of several Druze spiritual leaders to recognise the authority of President Ahmed Sharaa, who now leads the country following the fall of former President Bashar al-Assad. They accuse the new administration of excluding minority voices and warn Druze areas will resist any attempt to impose centralised control without consultation with them. And members of the Alawite community, once dominant under Assad, say they're being targeted in retaliation. Fears are growing that Syria's post-war transition could collapse into infighting between its disparate groups. Israel considers itself a defender of the Druze and has warned Damascus not to harm the community. That public statement has drawn criticism inside Syria, with some accusing Tel Aviv of trying to deepen internal divisions. For Syria's new leadership, power alone appears inadequate to secure national unity. The future of the country will depend on whether the government can build trust across sectarian and ethnic lines and prevent Syria's old wounds and divisions from reopening. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's discuss all of this further now with our guests who are joining us today. From Washington, D.C., we have Louay Safi, Syrian political scientist and former professor at Hamad bin Khalifa University. From Berlin, Shadi Abou Karam, a political activist and researcher who's originally from Sweida province in Syria. And from Dubai, Sami Akil, a political analyst and academic specialising in Syrian affairs. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, Louay, there in Washington, D.C. These are not the first clashes in Sweida this year. There seems now to be a deal to bring calm, but how serious has this violence been?
It has been substantially serious. There has been a few clashes, and the recent one that required the intervention of the government in Damascus was the most serious of all. So clearly, I mean, at this point, it seems that things are getting calmer. There is some agreement between the government in Damascus and the leaders within the Druze community to have ceasefire, and hopefully this will be the end, though we cannot be really sure at this point.
Shadi, you're there in Berlin, but I know that your family originally are from Suwayda. So can you tell me, what are you hearing from people on the ground? How worried have they been about the events in recent days?
First, allow me to honor the martyrs of Syria, and especially the martyrs of Sweida, the province that refused to be or take a part in the bloodbath of Syria during this conflict, and now it's paying the price for that choice. And before addressing any other point, and I would like to clearly state my condemnation and hold the transitional authorities in Syria fully responsible for the grave human rights violation happening now in Sweida while we're talking.
OK, but we'll come to that, and I certainly want to hear your position on who is to blame for what's happened. But in terms of friends and relatives there, what have they been telling you? How worried have they been about recent developments?
Yeah, in my family now, they left Sweida city. They went to the a small village around the city. They are seeking a safe place after general securities and forces belong to the defense minister of the state in Damascus entered the city of Sweida. Situation now is really bad. The internet, super bad. We barely can connect, from time to time to get some news. But my family now, they are safe till now. But the situation is really bad.
It is a very, very complex situation. It seems to be a mix of mistrust, local historical disputes and regional tensions. I'd like, Sami, to sort of take it stage by stage so that we can understand it. First, let's start with Sweida. It's a city in the very south of Syria, close to the Jordanian border, capital of Sweida Governorate, one of the country's 14 provinces. And I think the most important thing to say about it is the majority of people there are from the Druze minority. Tell us the basics. Who are the Druze? How big is their population? And perhaps you can give us an idea in recent years, what was their attitude to the Assad government? Because, of course, the Assad family had run in a brutal way Syria as a family business for 54 years until the end of last year.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. So obviously, the Druze community or minority in Syria constitutes around roughly 5% of Syria's population. The larger percentage of the population is centered around Sweida Governorate. However, there are other villages across Syria, particularly in Idlib and other governorates in Syria that do have a very small Druze minority, but within the Sweida Governorate, they do constitute the largest percentage of the population in the governorate. Having said that, the governorate itself is not only composed of Druze. There are Bedouin and Sunni tribes located in the peripheries of the governorate, who have been very much involved in the largest, or in the latest, rather, clashes that we've been seeing in the governorate. Beyond that, they've had a complicated history since the start of the Syrian uprising with the Assad government, the Assad regime. Some factions, some of their members were initially recruited into the Syrian armed forces. At the same time, many of the Druze religious figureheads and leaders were resistant to and did not want to partake into the bloodshed that was occurring in Syria. As such, they slowly but surely began building an autonomous autonomous governorate to some extent, coordinating to largely with the central government in Damascus, as is or was the case up until recently, following the deposal of the Assad regime. But at the same time, they have largely not participated in the armed uprising against the Syrian governorate, while also large segments of the Druze minority have also participated in protests. That needs to be reiterated. They were actively involved in the civil uprising during the early stages of the Syrian civil war, but also in 2020 until the fall of the regime, there were renewed protests, perhaps the only ones during the last years of the Assad regime's rule. So it is a complicated dynamic that we're seeing in Syria, and one that will have lasting implications as a result of the developments that we're seeing now.
Well, you're here to help us get through this complex subject and try to understand it. If I can go back to you, Shadi, because the Druze don't just live in Syria. There are Druze in Jordan, in Lebanon, and in Israel, Palestine. And although the Druze stand together as one community, given the complexity of this region, they find themselves on different sides in different countries. I mean, an example, the Druze leader in Lebanon, Wali Jumblat, no one would describe him as a friend of Israel, and yet the Druze that live in Israel serve, many of them in the Israeli military, often in combat roles. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. But that also goes like for Druze in Syria. Druze in Syria, they're not friends of Israel, and they're not calling Israel for any help. They refused the involvement of Israeli forces since long time, since the demonstration occurred in Sweida. It was clear that their message was clear. They are like against any involvement of the Israelis forces or any even like Sheikh Tarif in Israel. He tried many times to get involved in what happened in Sweida, but like
he's effectively the Druze leader in Israel. That's right?
Yep.
Okay, Louay, let's go to December last year, the fall of Assad. So much has happened in just over 7 months. I think it's probably worth reminding our viewers that there are Druze communities in the Damascus suburbs as well. And when Assad fell and took flight from the country, among the first fighters to arrive in Damascus were Druze fighters.
Well, that's true. There were forces from the southern provinces, mainly Daraa and Sweida, came to Damascus with the fall of the Assad regime. That's true. But that regime fell because of the push from the north. So there was, all Syrians really were part of that push to end the dictatorship of the Assad regime.
Okay, so since that point, Sami, where has the tension come from? Where has the mistrust, and perhaps it's on both sides, from the government in Damascus and from the Druze? What is behind the mistrust, would you say?
Sure, I think there are multiple reasons that have been leading us to the stage that we're seeing right now. Much of it, has to be said, is inherited as a result of 14 years of conflict and 54 years of dictatorship under the Assad regime. But the main reason that we can see now is attributed to the lack of political vision issued by the current government. The current government, to give it credit, has been saying a lot of the right things. However, it has not been able to walk or back the talk basically with tangible evidence on the ground, particularly when it comes to a inclusive governorate or governing system that incorporates a clear power-sharing structure where all segments of Syrian society are represented. Many of the developments that were intended to achieve some sort of cohesive social contract that incorporates all Syrians have been pretty rushed. For example, the Day of Dialogue that happened in February, followed by the Constitutional Declaration, which was seen by many Syrians as to be extremely problematic as it centralizes power within the hands of the presidency. Of course, yes, there have been a lot of ministries, the cabinet reshuffle, and the security sector reform that's been still ongoing. However, key ministries still remain in the hands of people closely affiliated with the current government in Damascus and its predecessor, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Key ministries including the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Justice Minister as well, including other ministries as well. So yes, there has been some other ministries that have been given to minorities, but I think largely those have been seen as being quite symbolic and not really a testament to the will of the Syrian people at the current stage. So
yeah, because let me bring in Shadi. Shadi, because I think the agriculture minister is the cabinet minister who is from the Druze community. If I can ask you a similar question to the one I just asked Sami, what would you say are the current fears of the Druze community? And let me add in another element. Does the Druze community speak with one voice? Because you seem to have secular and militia leaders, but also religious elders, the Sheikh al-Aql, who seem to be very prominent here. Explain how decision-making takes place in the Druze community.
First, let me explain something. Since day one, when Bashar al-Assad ran away from Syria, Sweida has asked for nothing more than its rightful, share. And let me explain this. They are talking about being represented and well respected, in a constitution that respect all Syrians, and not to get a piece of the cake by giving them one minister. This is what Sweida refused since day one. So this is like our main problem with the state in Damascus. We called for a political administration that represent all Syrians respectfully based on citizenship, not their sects or religious background.
Okay, can I just quickly get you? Can I get you, Shadi, on the second half of the question, if I can? Does the community speak with one voice, or are there differing opinions? And who is the lead voice? Is it the religious elders? Is it the secular leaders?
No, unfortunately, yes. And this is the mistake happened by the state of Sharaa after what happened in the coastal region. Everyone in Sweida, including the secular political activists in Sweida, they unified behind Sheikh Hikmat al-Hajari because they saw what happened in Latakia and Tartus and Jabla, and that's led them, to get behind Sheikh al-Hajari. So now, yes, there is a unified ruler in Sweida, which is al-Hajari.
Okay, Louay, the Syrian government has made mistakes. It's not properly sharing power. What do you make of those comments from Shadi?
Well, I think many Syrians have concerns about how the political situation is developing, but some of it is overblown, particularly what your guest representing the voice of the Sweida is saying. So yeah, there were excesses committed in the coastal region, but we have to remember that this came after the military forces that were loyal to the Assad created havoc in the region, killed many civilians, many of the security forces who were there to maintain security without really harming anyone in the coastal area. So I think, it seems to me that, there are people who are not appreciating how difficult it is to transition from the chaos of the Assad regime, particularly in the last 5 years, to a state of law. I think the government in Syria is imperfect, and it has many factions. Not all of them see eye to eye on issues. But for the most part, the top leadership have been really trying to transition the whole, the whole country into institutional state where you have institutions governing. Yes, I agree that there are more concentration among the people who are part of these forces that liberated the country. That's understandable given the fact that there is no stability at this point, and the country could fall apart, particularly if the current government has been pushed aside. Syria will become like Afghanistan after the liberation of Afghanistan in the early invasion of the Soviets. So
okay, I can see from his face, Louay, I can see from his face that
we have to give the government some time.
Give the government time. I hear your point, Louay. Give the government time. I can see from Shadi's face he doesn't agree with you on this. Shadi, surely anyone who took over government after 54 years of brutality and torture of Assad would have a difficult job running this country.
Excuse me, no. It was way easier if you started to build a state to represent all the Syrians and not build a state again, another authoritarian state based on one color. And today, excuse me, with this justifications or trying, to throw what's going on what they call it fulul, or now on, I don't know what they call it now, in Sweida, they want to separate from Syria. But when you see fighters riding on tanks, official tanks, with the logos of Ministry of Defense, chanting to kill a certain group, I don't know if this is something encouraging, to integrate in this state and to start the dialogue, to build Syria after Assad regime.
Sami, if I could bring you back in. I need to bring Sami back in. Shadi, I need to bring Sami back in here because there is a very significant part of the story that we've only briefly touched on, and that's the role of Israel. Israel occupied the Golan Heights in 1967. Since the fall of Assad, it's occupied land in Syria. And in these most recent clashes, Israel has got involved. What do you make of the Israeli involvement in all of this, Sami?
Sure, thank you very much. I would like just to, before touching on the Israeli issue, I'd just like to briefly touch on what Shadi and Louay were saying. The issue is not only power sharing. The issue is the lack of a national vision for this country. There is no efforts to actually construct a social contract for this country. And the policy that the Syrian government has so far been taking is a securitized approach. Peace through strength, basically. It is trying to strong arm any opposition that currently still is under the control of weaponry, which is fair at the end of the day if a central government wants to do that. But at the end of the day, the approach is
Sami, I need to get you back on the Israel issue, though, now. What do you think Israel is up to? What does Israel want out of this?
Yeah, so obviously Israel is trying to play a dual policy here. It is trying to play a destabilizing role on the one hand, but at the same time, through its attacks, through its incursions, through its occupation of Syrian territory, it is trying to engage and have some leverage for negotiations in the future with the Syrian government. We're all very aware that there are talks, indirect talks at this stage going on between the Syrian government and the Israeli government. There's talks of back-channel mediations and meetings having occurred in Baku recently in Azerbaijan, as well as recent trips to the United Arab Emirates. So Israel is trying to gain more leverage over the Syrian government to kind of force it into what it hopes to be a new addition to the Abraham Accords.
Okay. Louay is there. If you don't mind, Louay, you're there in Washington, D.C. These efforts being led by a close friend of Trump, Thomas Barak, who's the ambassador to Turkey, but also the special envoy for Syria and also involved in Lebanon. If he, as we think, is trying to persuade Syria to sign up to the Abraham Accords, do you think these recent clashes are going to complicate things?
Well, I think the clashes have nothing to do with Israel. Israel, of course, trying to interfere because it wants to keep Syria weak and divided, and probably would like to break up the country into small states. But that has nothing to do with the current conflict in the Suwayda. Clearly, the people of Suwayda really are divided on the issues.
You say that, Louay, but there's been military involvement by Israel in the last 48 hours. They have been involved, firing at people on the ground.
In violation of international law, of course, Israel is acting like a bully in the region. It has no right to attack Syria. It is not the guardian of the Druze in Syria. These Druze are Syrians, and they are proud of being Syrians, don't want to have any guardianship from the outside, but it's trying to abuse the situation. So that's what I'm saying. These are two different issues. What's happening in Sweida is about, lack of unity and division within the Sweida over how to achieve unity with the Damascus government. There are people like those who follow the Hajri would like to have Sweida like semi-autonomous, exactly like what's happening in the north. And there are people who don't believe this is a workable, formula and would like to become part of the government.
Okay. Very quickly, Louay, at the end of the discussion, I'd like to bring in Shadi one more time, just to be absolutely clear. Do the Druze community and the people of Sweida want the protection of Israel?
Of course, no. And we're not calling for this. And by the way, you cannot stop Israeli from Israeling unless you do something to prevent them. And that's like to build Syria with a state respectful, for all the component of this country, not building by one color. This is the thing. None of the people in Sweida went out and called Israel, to help them. But when you leave them, subjected for this, I don't want to say genocide, but like with this genocidal chanting, from the people who's coming to liberate Sweida.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Our guests today were Louay, Safi, Shadi, Abou, Karam and Sami Akil. If you missed any part of our discussion, you can always find it again whenever you want on our website, aljazeera.com. What should we discuss next time around on Inside Story? Let us know your suggestions on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or you can post to us on X. There you'll find us at AJ Inside Story. I'll be back here again very soon. But until next time, from me, James Bays, and the team here in Doha, stay safe and well. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.